Most people will hear what I'm about to say and immediately feel uncomfortable because it threatens the story they've been telling themselves for years. So if you're watching this casually, scrolling, half listening, this isn't for you. But if there's a part of you that knows you're capable of more and is tired of repeating the same patterns, then stay with me, because this might be the most honest conversation you've had in a long time. You are not meant to feel this constantly tired, distracted, and quietly dissatisfied. That feeling you keep pushing away, the one that shows up late at night when everything goes silent, isn't weakness. It's awareness. It's the part of you that knows you've been negotiating with your potential instead of demanding something better from yourself. And the reason this matters is because life does not pause while you figure things out. Every day you delay, you are still choosing, just not consciously. Here's what most people won't tell you. Nothing dramatic is holding you back. No single trauma, no secret enemy. No missing opportunity. What's holding you back is subtle. It's comfort. It's distraction. It's the habit of waiting for the right mood, the right moment, the right motivation. And while you wait, your standards quietly drop. This video is not here to make you feel good for 10 minutes. It's here to confront you with a question you can't ignore once you hear it. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next 5 years, would you respect the person you've become? Because change doesn't start with intensity, it starts with honesty. So don't leave yet. Not because I need your attention, but because this might be the moment you stop lying to yourself, and that moment changes everything. Most people don't like this idea, so they soften it, decorate it, or turn it into something inspirational sounding. But the truth is very plain, and once you really understand it, it changes how you move through the world. No one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your partner, not society, not the right opportunity, not even time. And the moment this lands, not emotionally but intellectually, you stop living like a victim of circumstances and start living like an active participant in your own life. From a psychological point of view, the human mind is wired to look outward when things go wrong. We search for reasons, explanations, and people to blame because blame protects the ego. It allows us to feel innocent while remaining stuck. If it's the economy, the culture, your childhood, your ex, or your bad luck, then the responsibility is not fully yours. And as long as responsibility is external, power is external too. You cannot change what you don't control. This is why so many people feel helpless without being physically trapped. Their lives are not constrained by chains, but by beliefs. They believe someone else should notice them, guide them, motivate them, or fix what feels broken. But life doesn't work like a caring parent. Life works more like a mirror. It reflects back what you consistently do, not what you hope for or intend. Philosophically, accepting that no one is coming to save you is not pessimism, it is realism. And realism is empowering. When you remove the illusion of rescue, you are forced to confront a deeper question. If no one is coming, then what am I going to do with the time, energy, and agency I have right now? That question is uncomfortable because it exposes passivity. It reveals how often we wait instead of act. Many people say they want independence, strength, confidence, and self-respect, but what they actually want is reassurance without responsibility. They want someone to tell them they are enough without asking them to grow, yet self-respect does not come from being affirmed, it comes from keeping promises to yourself. Confidence is not something you are given, it is something you earn through evidence, and evidence only comes from action. When you truly internalize that no one is coming, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop saying, I'll start when I feel ready, because readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision. You stop waiting for clarity, because clarity comes from movement, not from thinking. And you stop outsourcing your emotional stability to other people because you realize how fragile that makes you. There is also a relational aspect to this idea that is often misunderstood. Some people hear no one is coming to save you and think it means isolation, emotional coldness, or radical self-reliance. That's not what this means. It doesn't mean you don't need others. It means you stop expecting others to do your inner work for you. Support is healthy. Dependence is not. The difference is subtle but life-changing. In relationships, for example, many people unconsciously look for someone to complete them, regulate them, or distract them from unresolved parts of themselves. This creates pressure, resentment, and imbalance. When you accept that no one is coming to save you, you approach relationships differently. You come as a whole person, not a project. You seek connection, not rescue. And paradoxically, that makes you more attractive, more grounded, and more secure. From a developmental perspective, this is what maturity looks like. Childhood is the phase where someone else is responsible for your survival and structure. Adulthood begins the moment you accept responsibility for your direction. Not your fault for everything that happened to you, but your responsibility for what happens next. That distinction matters. Blaming yourself for the past is useless. Avoiding responsibility for the future is dangerous. There is also a quiet dignity that comes with this realization. When you stop waiting to be saved, you stop performing for approval. You no longer need constant validation to keep moving forward. Your motivation becomes internal rather than reactive. You work on yourself not because someone is watching, but because you are. And that changes the quality of your effort. Psychologically, this shift moves you from an external locus of control to an internal one. People with an external locus of control feel like life happens to them. People with an internal locus of control feel like life responds to them. Research consistently shows that this internal orientation is linked to resilience, better mental health, and long-term success. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become sturdier. Once you accept that no one is coming, excuses start to lose their power. You still notice obstacles, but you don't use them as reasons to stop. You say, "This is hard," instead of, "This is impossible." You stop dramatizing discomfort and start treating it as part of the process. And this is where real growth happens, not in moments of inspiration, in moments of resistance. There is also a moral dimension to this idea. When you refuse to take responsibility for your life, someone else eventually pays the price. It might be your future self, exhausted and bitter. It might be your partner carrying emotional weight that isn't theirs. It might be your children inheriting patterns you never addressed. Avoidance doesn't disappear, it transfers. So when you work on yourself, you're not just doing something for personal gain, you're reducing the burden you place on others. You're becoming more emotionally regulated, more accountable, more capable. You're choosing to be someone who contributes stability instead of chaos. And that choice starts with the refusal to wait for rescue. This doesn't mean you won't struggle. It doesn't mean you won't doubt yourself. It means you stop using struggle and doubt as excuses to remain unchanged. You learn to move forward with uncertainty rather than waiting for certainty. You learn to act even when you don't fully trust yourself yet, knowing that trust is built through follow-through. Over time, something interesting happens. The same world that once felt indifferent begins to respond differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. You make decisions faster and regret them less. And people sense that you are not looking to be saved. You are looking to build. And if there is one thought worth sitting with, it is this: the moment you stop waiting for someone to save you is the moment you become someone worth trusting, by yourself and by others. No one is coming. And that is exactly why this is finally in your hands. Once you accept that no one is coming to save you, the next illusion quietly falls apart as well. The idea that motivation will somehow carry you forward. Motivation is seductive. It feels good. It feels powerful. It gives you that brief sense of clarity where everything seems possible. But psychologically, motivation is a state, not a strategy. States are temporary. And building a life on something temporary is one of the most common ways people sabotage themselves without realizing it. If you look closely at the lives of people who are consistently stable, grounded, and effective, you'll notice something important. They are not more motivated than everyone else. In fact, they often feel tired, bored, doubtful, and uninspired, just like anyone else. The difference is not emotional intensity, it is behavioral consistency. They do what needs to be done even when their feelings are not cooperating. This is where discipline enters the conversation, and unfortunately, discipline has a branding problem. People hear the word and imagine punishment, rigidity, or a joyless existence. But discipline at its core is not about control for its own sake. It is about self-trust. It is the system you build so your future self doesn't have to rely on your current mood. From a psychological perspective, discipline reduces decision fatigue. When your actions are guided by structure rather than impulse, you conserve mental energy. You stop renegotiating with yourself every morning about whether you should show up, try again, or give up. The decision has already been made. That frees you to focus on execution rather than internal debate. Motivation asks, do I feel like doing this today? Discipline asks, who do I want to become, regardless of how today feels? That shift in questioning is everything. Many people wait to feel confident before they act. But confidence is not the cause of action. It is the result of repeated action. You don't wake up one day suddenly disciplined. You become disciplined by acting in alignment with your values, even when it's uncomfortable. Over time, those actions accumulate into identity. And identity is far more powerful than fleeting motivation. There is also a deeper emotional reason why people resist discipline. Discipline confronts you with your own inconsistencies. It removes the comforting fantasy that you are capable of more if only circumstances were different. When you commit to disciplined action, you expose the gap between who you think you are and how you actually behave. That gap can be uncomfortable to face. So many people avoid it by staying in the realm of intention rather than execution. Philosophically, discipline is a form of self-respect. When you say you will do something and then follow through, even in small ways, you are reinforcing the belief that your word matters. When you repeatedly break promises to yourself, you slowly erode that belief. This erosion doesn't always show up as failure. It often shows up as anxiety, self-doubt, and a quiet lack of confidence you can't quite explain. Think about how much trust you place in people who are inconsistent. You may like them, but you don't rely on them. The same is true internally. If you are inconsistent with yourself, your mind stops trusting why. Discipline rebuilds that trust one action at a time. There is also a common misunderstanding that discipline kills creativity, passion, or spontaneity. In reality, discipline creates the conditions in which these things can exist sustainably. Without structure, creativity becomes chaotic. Without routine, passion burns out. Discipline gives your energy direction, which makes it more effective, not less. When you rely on motivation, your progress is fragile. One bad day can derail weeks of effort. One emotional setback can become a full stop. Discipline, on the other hand, allows you to keep moving forward even when life is messy. You don't need to feel inspired to keep a commitment. You just need to honor it. This is particularly important when it comes to emotional discipline. Many people think discipline only applies to productivity or physical habits. But emotional discipline may be even more critical. It is the ability to pause before reacting, to tolerate discomfort without numbing it, to choose a thoughtful response over an impulsive one. Emotional discipline is what allows you to grow without becoming bitter, defensive, or reactive. From a neurological standpoint, discipline strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, impulse control, and long-term thinking. Every time you act against short-term comfort in favor of long-term benefit, you are literally training your brain to tolerate discomfort and delay gratification. This is not about willpower, it is about conditioning, and here's the part people rarely talk about. Discipline does not mean perfection, it means reliability. You will fail sometimes, you will miss days, you will slip. The disciplined person does not collapse under these moments. They return quickly, without drama, without self-hatred. They understand that consistency is built through turn, not through flawlessness. When discipline becomes part of your identity, you stop needing external press. You don't need someone to push you, threaten you, or praise you. Your standards become internal. You do the work because that is who you are, not because you are being watched. This also changes how you relate to time. Motivation lives in the present. Discipline thinks in decades. It understands that the compound effect of small, unglamorous actions will always outperform intense but inconsistent effort. You stop asking, how fast can I get results? And start asking, what can I sustain? Over time, this mindset produces a quiet kind of power. You become less reactive to setbacks and less dependent on emotional highs. You stop chasing intensity and start valuing stability. And stability, though less dramatic, is far more transformative. Eventually, something shifts. You no longer see discipline as something you force yourself to do. It becomes something you choose because you understand its value. You recognize that every disciplined action is a vote for the person you are becoming. And that person begins to feel more grounded, more capable, and more trustworthy. To yourself and to others, motivation will always come and go. That is its nature. But discipline stays. It carries you on the days when belief is weak and energy is low. It builds a life that does not collapse the moment you feel tired, uncertain, or uninspired. If there is one thought worth holding on to, it is this: discipline is not about being hard on yourself, it is about being honest with yourself. And when you choose discipline over motivation, you stop chasing change, and you start becoming it. Once discipline becomes part of how you live rather than something you occasionally force, a deeper realization begins to surface. You start to notice that real change does not happen at the level of goals or outcomes. It happens at the level of identity. This is where many people quietly get stuck. They try to improve their lives while protecting the very version of themselves that created the life they are dissatisfied with. From a psychological standpoint, identity is the story you tell yourself about who you are. It is not just what you believe, but what you repeatedly prove through action. When someone says, "I'm not disciplined," or "I'm just not confident," or "I've always been this way," they are not describing facts. They are reinforcing an identity. And once an identity is reinforced long enough, the mind works hard to protect it, even if it is limiting or painful. This is why people can genuinely want change and still resist it. Growth threatens identity. If you change your behavior consistently, you eventually have to change how you see yourself, and that can feel destabilizing. The familiar, even when unhealthy, feels safer than the unknown. So people chase surface-level improvements while holding on to old self-definitions. Philosophically, this is the difference between doing and becoming. Doing is temporary. Becoming is permanent. You can force yourself to act differently for a while, but if your identity remains the same, you will eventually revert. The mind always pulls behavior back toward the identity it recognizes as self. This is why willpower alone rarely works long-term. Willpower is effort without identity alignment. Identity change, on the other hand, makes effort feel natural. When your actions are consistent with who you believe you are, they require far less resistance. Consider how this works in everyday life. A person who sees themselves as someone who takes care of their body does not constantly debate whether to exercise. A person who identifies as emotionally regulated does not feel heroic for pausing before reacting. A person who sees themselves as reliable does not need motivation to keep their word. The behavior flows from the identity. The mistake many people make is trying to change identity through affirmation rather than evidence. They repeat phrases, visualize outcomes, and hope the mind will follow. But the mind is skeptical. It changes belief only when behavior provides proof. Identity shifts when your actions repeatedly contradict your old self-image and begin to form a new pattern. This is where discipline, discussed earlier, becomes essential. Discipline is not the goal, it is the mechanism. It creates the behavioral consistency necessary for identity change. Every time you act in alignment with the person you want to become, even in small ways, you weaken the old identity and strengthen the new. 1. There is also a relational consequence to identity change that is rarely acknowledged. When you evolve, some people around you will feel uncomfortable. Not because you have done something wrong, but because your change disrupts the roles they are used to. If you were always the one who overgave, your boundaries may feel threatening. If you were always the one who avoided responsibility, your accountability may feel unsettling. This is why identity change often feels lonely at first. You are no longer fully aligned with who you were, but not yet fully integrated into who you are becoming. That in-between space is uncomfortable. Many people retreat at this stage, not because the work is too hard, but because the social friction is too great. Staying the same preserves belonging. Changing risks it. But psychologically, self-betrayal in exchange for belonging comes at a high cost. It shows up as resentment, quiet anger, and a sense that you are living a life that doesn't quite fit. Identity change asks you to tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term alignment. It asks you to choose self-respect over approval. There is also an important emotional maturity that comes with this process. As your identity strengthens, you become less reactive to external validation or criticism. Praise does not inflate you as much, and disapproval does not crush you as deeply. Your sense of self becomes internally anchored rather than externally negotiated. This is particularly relevant in a culture that constantly invites comparison. When identity is weak, comparison becomes painful. You measure yourself against others and either feel superior or inferior, neither of which is stable. When identity is strong, comparison becomes informational rather than emotional. You can learn from others without losing yourself. From a philosophical lens, identity change is an act of authorship. You move from being a character in a story written by habit, environment, and past experiences to being the author of your own narrative. This does not mean denying the past, it means refusing to be limited by it. Importantly, identity change does not require you to become someone else entirely. It requires you to refine. You don't discard your personality, you mature it. You don't erase your history, you integrate it. You take responsibility for who you are becoming, rather than blaming who you have been. One of the most subtle shifts that occurs during identity change is how you talk to yourself. The internal dialogue becomes more respectful, more direct, and less dramatic. You stop catastrophizing small failures and stop romanticizing struggle. You see yourself as someone in progress rather than someone perpetually behind, and with that shift comes a different relationship to setbacks. Setbacks no longer define why. Oh, they inform you. You don't ask, what does this say about me? You ask, what does this teach me? That question alone changes everything. Over time, the new identity becomes familiar. What once felt forced begins to feel natural. What once required effort becomes automatic. And people around you begin to respond differently, not because you're trying to impress them, but because your presence has changed. You are calmer, clearer, more grounded. This is the point where life begins to reflect the inner work you have done, not in dramatic overnight transformations, but in quiet alignment. Your decisions become cleaner, your relationships become healthier, your self-respect becomes non-negotiable. And if there is one idea worth sitting with, it is this: you do not change your life by demanding more from the world. You change your life by becoming someone who demands more from themselves, with clarity and compassion. Change the identity, and the life will follow, not because it is easy, but because it is inevitable.